Anyway, so I'm playing a big rivalry game for high school baseball. It's like the equivalent of like the Jewish Subway Series for Chicagoland high school baseball. So pretty big deal. To set the scene, right? It's the bottom of the seventh inning, high school baseball. You only play 7 innings, so it's their last chance to bat. We're winning by 3 runs. The opposing team, they have a runner on second, and they have one out. Anyways, the pitcher pitches the ball, right? It gets hit. It's hit towards me. I'm in the outfield, playing left field, so it's a shorter throw to third. So I catch the ball, throw it to third. The runner second tags up. He thinks he can beat my throw, and the throw beats him by a mile, right? Third baseman catches it. He's gonna apply the tag. He's gonna get him out. Guy running. He really got no choice. He slides into third. He slides into the guy's arms. Like my third baseman's like cradling him like a baby almost, right? So you don't even really need an umpire to say that this guy's out. But apparently, things were different, right? The umpire comes running over. It's like this old guy, so maybe you can cut him some slack. He throws his arms up. He's like, safe. And, at that point, basically my whole team was running in like, all right, yeah, inning's over. Let's go celebrate. We won, right? No, apparently not. And after that, they go on to score a couple more runs, tie the game up. We go to extra innings. Thankfully, our team was good enough. We won. But, it's just plays like that where it's like, these terrible calls and, right, because the guy was cleared out. And it's like these terrible calls, they really have a big difference on the game. And it's not just a high school problem, it's like a baseball problem, right? So, like, bad calls, when they're called, they don't just affect that single play. And that's kind of like a big difference between baseball and other sports is that, in other sports, these single calls, they might, maybe they have trickling down effects, but in baseball, they have huge effects, right? So, of course, they'll alter the play, but then again, they'll also alter the game, games, like their performance, seasons, careers. They have big and major effects. That I think people really don't realize is that baseball is a very mental game. And when there's a bad call, especially a series of bad calls that really don't go your way, yeah, it can basically ruin your career because all of a sudden you lost all your confidence in your swing. All of a sudden, your changeup doesn't work anymore because it's not getting called. It's just, what works used to not work, and that's tough, right? And can be caused a lot of times by just bad umpiring. And I think one of the biggest examples of this is the infamous 28-out perfect game. There was a Detroit Tigers pitcher named Armando Galarraga. This was in like 2010. He was 1 out away from the perfect game. And for those who don't know, perfect game is the pinnacle of pitching performances. Is when you get 28 outs straight from the start of the game to the finish of the game, no base runners, right? Very, very hard achievement. 20 pitchers in history have done it. So he's 1 out away. He pitches the ball. It's a ground ball to the shortstop. It's a routine play, easy out. Ball gets thrown. It's a close play at first, but it's like pretty clear the guy's out. Umpire puts his arms up that he's safe. And there's nothing you can do about it, right? He made the call, and that's it. There's no contesting the call. There's no taking it back or anything like that. The call is final, and instantly you see it was a bad call, and it ruined this guy's basically career. Because a perfect game is a career-defining moment. Think about the amount of confidence a pitcher has after they get a perfect game. It's a lot. It's a very career-defining moment, and arguably it ruined Galarraga's career. He wasn't able to pitch the same. He ultimately got injured after it. And a lot of that can be attributed to that play. All right, so it's like, what exactly does this mean? Basically what it means is that, umpires are competing at the highest level of the sport, right? They're competing at the acme of baseball. So there should be an extremely high bar, but somehow there is not. And let me get more into this because baseball is a game of numbers. If anyone, follows baseball closely, like they know stats are basically everything in baseball. So I think I should get into some stats. According to Umpire Scorecard, which is a website that takes track of stats of umpires. It's very niche, but it's helpful in this case. From 2015 to 2025, which is midway through the season already, 6 to 10% of calls made by umpires were just incorrect. And, that's a lot, but it's even more so when in baseball, there's hundreds of calls made a game. So that adds up. And this stat also takes into account, this isn't just pitch calling, this is calling players out at first base, force out, tags, type of plays where it's pretty clear. In the eyes of umpires, it's a routine play. So, in essence, these numbers, they're deflated. BaseballSavant.com, using their pitch FX tool, which takes into account every variable that goes into a pitch, which is pretty cool, including umpire, temperature, it's everything, right? So because they were able to track umpire using this pitch FX tool, they're able to do is from 2008 to 2013, they're able to deduce that 13% of balls that were thrown were called strikes, meaning 13% of pitches outside of the strike zone were called strikes. And this is a called strike, not a swinging strike, meaning the batter did not swing. It was just straight out called a strike. And then 15% of called strikes were actually balls. Here's what I mean by this. It's the same thing too, meaning 15% of pitches that were outside, that were inside the strike zone were called balls, meaning they should have been called strikes, they were called balls. And I mean, there's 300 pitches thrown in a game on average. Probably 250 of them, maybe 200 of them are no calls, meaning, and that's being generous. So, I mean, that's already 26 to 30 pitches that are just the wrong call. And that adds up. That's huge, right? That's the difference between multiple at-bats, multiple base runners, probably multiple runs. And that can be the difference in the outcome of games. So it's clear that, like, this has an effect on the game and how it's played. Okay, so I think it's clear that, bad umpiring is an issue in MLB and it's having major ramifications on the game. So what exactly has been done to combat this issue, right? So in the mid-2010s, the MLB implemented a new series of rules that allowed for managers and coaches to challenge plays. What this allowed for is that if there was a bad call, then the manager can challenge it. And they only got a limited amount, so it wouldn't ruin the flow of the game. Now, the one drawback with this being, you could only challenge most of the possible outcomes. What this means is that balls in play, stolen bases, that kind of stuff, you could challenge as the manager. But pitching outcomes, meaning balls, strikes, check swings, or balks, you could not challenge. And as the stats have shown, the majority of the hiccups in umpiring have come from pitching. So what's the big solution for that? Well, in 2019, the minor league introduced ABS, which is auto ball strike system. This, in essence, is an AI or robot umpire. So there was two implementations that were utilized. The first implementation was similar to what was implemented in the 2010s, which was a challenge rule. Basically, pitchers, batters, and hitters, basically meaning whoever's involved in the pitching process, was able to challenge a ball or strike call, right? Meaning that a hitter could challenge if a pitch that was called a strike, he thought it was a ball, he could challenge that. Similarly, pitchers and catchers, if there was a pitch that was called a ball and they thought it was a strike, they could challenge that. And yes, there were only limited amount of challenges per game because it would also ruin the flow of the game. So that was the first implementation of the ABS system. The second implementation was basically where the ABS system would call the balls and the strikes, and then it'd be relayed to the umpire who called the signals. So the first implementation, the challenge rule, has been the ABS system that's been implemented the most. It is most likely the implementation that will be used during the 2026 Major League Baseball season, which is pretty big. So, why exactly is this? Well, chances are is that the Major League doesn't want to replace umpires. They hold a big place in the tradition of the sport. So what are the positives for the ABS system? Well, the first is that it allows for a fair and predictable pitch calling. That means less angry fans and less angry players because there's less bad calls. What it also does is it also allows for players to show off a lot more of their raw skill and talent, meaning that bad calls, they hinder performances, right? They make batters guessing what's a strike, what's a ball, when they really shouldn't. Batters put in a lot of training, and same with pitchers, into locating the strikes and memorizing a strike zone. If all of a sudden a strike zone is different, that's taking a lot away from their talent and skill that they've worked so hard to achieve. So the system has also gotten player-wide acclaim. Clayton Kershaw, who's a Cy Young winner pitcher, he said, I did a few rehab starts with it. I'm okay with it. I think it works. Aaron Judge and Jose Altuve should have different sized boxes. They've obviously thought about that. As long as they get it figured out, I think it'll be fine. And this was in an Associated Press article that he was featured in. So, talks about the positives. There's backlash. What is that? Well, baseball purists and those who care deeply about the tradition of the game claim that the umpire tradition is a vital part of the game and that the human aspect is what makes baseball the sport that it is, meaning that if you take away the umpiring and the uncertainty of calls, it takes away a vital part of the game. And it's also, a little entertaining, right? Because some people enjoy watching, players get heated, fans yell from the upper decks, oh, what are you doing? That was a terrible call, right? And they obviously can't see it, but it's kind of funny. But in all honesty, the future's not avoidable, right? Baseball can't sit here and let the future pass it and allow it to become basically the past, right? Baseball, it's in a situation where, especially the Major League, there have been other leagues that have been able to, like the Savannah Bananas, make baseball entertaining and interested to the masses. But I think if baseball doesn't use AI and use modern technology like other sports have been able to, I think leagues like the Major League and the minor league, they'll go to irrelevance. which is I think why ABS is needed. And I don't think it'll ruin tradition because umpires still have a final say and umpires still hold a large role in the sport. Another argument against the ABS system is that it'll take away and diminish careers of players who've been able to game umpires. What do I mean by this? Well, in baseball, especially for catchers, there's this idea of pitch framing. Basically, what it is that catchers, when they catch the ball, they don't just leave their mitt where it is, but they shift it. They shift it slightly so that it's not very noticeable. But what it allows to is it allows for the pitch that would be a ball to look a lot more like a strike. This is very useful in breaking balls when pitches move out of the zone. The catcher can catch it and like flick their wrist, and all of a sudden it's in the zone. So that's very important. But with ABS, it's not a thing anymore because ABS doesn't track what the umpire sees. It tracks when exactly the ball goes over the plate. That's a big difference because umpires make calls based off where they see the ball and where they see the catcher's mitt. If they see the catcher's mitt right over home plate, they're going to think it's a strike. Catchers are able to save in the double digits of runs per season. That could be the difference between winning and losing a game. That means a lot. Another way of gaming umpires is corner pitting. What this is a pitching strategy where the pitcher incrementally locates pitches farther and farther from the fringes of the strike zone. So the way this works is at the start of the game, a pitcher will throw a couple pitches in the corner. Hopefully they get the favorable call as in a strike. What they'll do is over the course of the game, they will throw the pitches farther and farther out of the corner, but it's an incremental difference. So at first glance, when you're comparing the first pitch and the second pitch, they look pretty similar. But as it goes on, what it does is it stretches out the strike zone because all of a sudden, a pitch a couple ball lengths out is being called a strike because it looks like the previous pitch was a strike, like the previous. Ultimately, I think pitchers and catchers will be able to find new ways to game umpires, game ABS. And I think baseball is just that kind of sport where sometimes pitching has an advantage, sometimes hitting has an advantage. I think this is one of the rules that gives hitting an advantage. Dead balls will give pitchers an advantage. So the third and probably most legitimate concern is that ABS will cause more injuries. Okay, so what do I mean by this? Well, like stated earlier, 15% of called strikes were actually balls. What that means is with the ABS system, pitchers will have to throw more strikes in the zone. Chances are that's probably more hits and more pitches being thrown by the pitcher. What that means is more injuries. The more a pitcher throws a baseball, the more injured they will get. And look, I don't think that's that big of a concern as it sounds like. In the major leagues, we're in a kind of an age now where there's a lot more relief games. There's a lot more pitchers going in for 3, 4, 5 innings than there used to be. It used to be pitchers would pitch for 7, 8, 9 innings. They'd pitch for 120, 140, 150 pitches. That's not a thing anymore. There's a significantly less amount of pitchers nowadays that even throw up to 100 pitches, which is like sort of the golden standard when it comes to taking out your pitcher. And I think in the end, it'll just force pitchers to adapt, find new pitches to throw, be more efficient with their pitches, and just find new ways to get the batter out in less pitches. Baseball is a sport in an ever-evolving world. MLB wants to stay relevant. They have to implement ABS. It'll create more offense, it'll make games more exciting overall, and it'll make the viewing experience better. ABS won't ruin the tradition of the game. It will be used by umpires as a tool similar to replay assist. ABS will also force pitchers and catchers in a league that is advantageous towards pitchers to adjust and find new ways to get batters out. And as for the injury concerns, well, pitchers are pitching less and less nowadays. More pitchers are pitching per game, and more pitchers are pitching less innings and thus less pitches, meaning that ABS won't affect the longevity of a pitcher. Major League Baseball's implementation of ABS should prove as an example for entertainment and sports as how to implement AI into their systems. Should the new ABS system be a success, then the MLB could pave a new age of sports merged with technology.